space growing. So it's really just be able to grow in a small space. So whether that's in a balcony, a rooftop, patio, or small yard, but you can kind of, you don't really need to have an exact measurement, whether it's whatever 2x4 or 10x4. Like I have a garden which is 5x5, and it's probably considered large for some people, but it's considered small for where I live. And I use it in such a way which I feel like I get maximum benefit, but I actually make it very intensive. And I use the permaculture principle, so I don't have to do that much work. Less space means less moving around, less water, less compost, less everything, but there's a lot that grows there. So I just want to just kind of sink down and talk about why small space growing is important before we look at some of the benefits. So small space growing, super important for those people out there that live in small spaces. I don't know, it sounds like maybe Amy is the one here that lives in a bit of a small urban space in Melbourne. But generally it's to find a way to work within your limitations, because if you live in an apartment, you might have limited sun, you might have some strong winds. So it's about trying to create a space to grow with what you have. There's also, you're probably all aware of the industry of the agriculture system, and yeah, during COVID, we went through an absolute roller coaster, and we learned that how important it is to have our own food and to be able to just grow your veggies and herbs, which leafy greens and herbs, I would say, is probably the easiest things to grow. It just be able to take that dependency off the agricultural system does a lot for you, but also for the entire community. And there's also mental and physical health benefits that we often forget, but you could probably, everybody here that's garden can share that how much benefits you get from just being in the garden, connecting with nature, seeing the worms. Had a few people already spoken about worms. So yeah, there's a lot that we can get out of gardening in general, and small space growing is just a more manageable way. So some of the benefits that I've listed down is you've got access to fresh, nutritious produce. It's space efficient. So you're using techniques which helps maximize the productivity in small spaces. So something that I've shared in the course, you can grow in a square meter, you can grow 12 heads of lettuce. So what's that? That's like 2.5 feet in square. So you can grow quite a lot of food in 1 square meter if you do it in such a way, which we'll talk about soon. There's also cost savings. We've spoken about, a few people here have said, like, going out and growing in a large garden. It's a lot of energy, it's a lot of water, it's a lot of maintenance. But if you do it in a small space, it's cost saving, but it's also saving on your body too. So that's something that I think is an important benefit as well. Some of the challenges that I've briefly touched on is, for small space growing, you might have sunlight might be hard. You don't have a huge property to just pick the ideal spot and just do it. You might have challenges with the soil quality. So you might not have great soil. You might have to get bag soil and bring that up, and then use some compost amendments and really turn that into living soil again. Watering might be challenging. You might just have to use the kitchen sink and water up a watering can. So there's some challenges there, but there are solutions to overcome them. And generally, how I like to treat all gardens is that my ideal garden and my, I would say, purpose of a garden is to turn it into an ecosystem. An ecosystem is not reliant on people. It is resilient. If you walk into a forest, you don't see somebody coming up there and fertilizing it once a week or watering it. No, it's a system that helps itself, which is essentially what the sub pod is. It's the hub of that system. It allows to break down your food waste, spread the microbes and nutrients, which is the foundation, and that helps everything else grow. So that's what I want to get to. When I think of a garden, I'm a lazy gardener. I don't like to do too much work. I like for the garden to do its own work. And that's what I try to move towards is that to have a self-reliant garden, which have similar principles to a forest, which is permaculture in a nutshell. So I want to talk a little bit about permaculture, but before I do that, I think Catherine might have a good story to talk about just small space growing in a nutshell. Catherine, your experience and a story to go with it? What have you got out of it? What have you found challenging?
Oh, look, I've made lots of great notes here. Like for me, because I've also never really owned my own property and traveled a lot. So I found that once I discovered the ability to grow food and understood how important the soil was as far as being able to grow something, to have a small container, to have a small bed, to have a small space, I mean, I had so much more ability to not only, not, I don't want to say control over, but the ability to feed it, to add organic matter, to take care of that soil, which then, of course, helped to take care of the plants. I was able to not only like maybe move those plants with me when I would, move around, but it was just a bit like you were saying, Amy, about being able to get the right amount of sun, to be able to take it out of the wind at certain times of year. It just gave me a much more broader understanding of what I'm looking after the plants by looking after the soil, by looking after what it is that I can put, what the inputs into those things. And I think one of the biggest revelation for me was when, as I said, I was on that island and I wanted to start growing food, and I would grab a seed and I'd stick it in the ground and not really ever having any understanding about the soil and the ground being so important to make something grow, and nothing happened. And then coming across permaculture and learning, I think it was the lasagna,
Mm,
the layering of different kinds of materials, which was basically building soil from scratch. And the success that came out of that just really opened my eyes to how important it is to be giving that soil everything it needs. Therefore, you're giving the plants everything it needs. And the beauty of small space, the beauty of small beds is you have much more control. You're not, as Peter said, you're not wasting lots of resources trying to do a huge, big scale. And look, for those of us who are obviously here in our, as Jane Fonda would say, at the third act of our life, we don't want to be doing too much physical activity. We don't want to have too much to look after. Like we've got enough already going on in our lives. To have a small space, to make that successful, to make that work, and to go, yay, I've got that. Then you can go on to doing more if you want to. But it's, yeah, all of those things that I love about small space. And for me, as Peter said, my greens, if I can grow my greens and my herbs, my parsleys, my arugula, my rocket, my, spinach, things that I use every day in my cooking, then that for me is so much joy. And then to be able to then share that with others. And then, so wherever I go, I plant something, whether it's in a pot or whether it's in someone's garden. If I'm staying somewhere, I'm always growing, and just to help inspire people to understand that we can grow wherever we are. So anyway,
mm.
that's my little rave.
No, great. Thanks, Catherine. Uh, so that's a good segue into the next section, which is what is permaculture. And no, I will try to do this as quick as I can because I want to leave room for Q&A. But essentially, permaculture is a big umbrella term. I did a Cert 3 in permaculture, which went for a year, and we actually spent a month on every principle. So to give you a bit of background, permaculture, it was invented by David Holmgren and Bill Mollison. I've got most of their books here. They're chunky, they're Bibles. So this is like the Bible of permaculture by Bill Mollison, and this is more recent one by David Holmgren. And together, these guys created the concept of permaculture, which stands for permanent agriculture. So they found a way, well, really, they were using a lot of indigenous understandings and ecosystem ideas, and then put that in a systematic thinking and concepts for people to understand. But in some ways, it is nothing new. You could talk to your grandparents and they'd be doing permaculture things, really. But it is really clever on how they've taken all of these ideas and put it in a way that we can understand. But in a nutshell, it's based on principles of ecological design, systems thinking, and sustainable agriculture. So it's quite large, but what we're going to do is apply it to small space growing. Some of the techniques that I'd like to touch on, because people have shared this, is the idea of zones. So in permaculture, they have about 5 zones, and if you draw your house from a bird's eye view, zone 0 would just be your immediate house, and then maybe a couple meters around it. And in zone 0, that's the place you're going to be visiting most frequent. And you have zone 1, It's going to be a little bit larger. Zone 2, zone 3, zone 5 is the wild zone. Something you might go there once a year. You don't even think about it. It's just an ecological space. So if you understand the zones, and then maybe zone 1 is like what Catherine was saying, some of those easy herbs, those greens. Like I have my sub pod here, which is in zone 1. It's my back door's right there. I don't want to be traveling to zone 5 to take up my compost. Lots of people actually do that. They travel all the way to their back forest and throw it out. Like, what a pain. You just want to remove those barriers. So thinking of the zones and the frequency in how you walk and interact with these zones will give you a better understanding. And we could spend 30 minutes on just the zones. I spent a week on them, but that's just a kind of one principle, like one concept in permaculture, which helps you understand ways to make things more efficient. Another concept that I want to briefly explain is stacking. And stacking is really important because in small space growing, if you understand how large a plant will grow and how long it will take for maturity, and what type of plant they are, and which we actually go into the course on week 3, you can grow more in a small space. So say if you had let's talk about a lettuce, it's quite a shallow root plant. You have that, they grow quite large, quite small, but on the back of it, you have potentially like a broccoli, which is a lot larger. And then behind that, I might have something that will work on a trellis, like peas or something, or I can grow raspberries down here. But it's the idea of putting maximum amount of plants in a small space. And that does a couple of things beneficially. It allows you to grow more so you can have more food, but actually these plants work well together because they're not competing with each other if their roots are taking up different horizons. So it's important to understand, even when you learn about these plants, is like, where are their root depths going? Is it just a shallow depth? Is it medium? Is it large? Is it a tap root? And then you can plant them next to each other, and they're not going to be competing. They're actually going to be cooperating. And because you've got so many plants there too, they'll actually be shading out, and shading out the soil, so you won't have weeds growing underneath. Still good to add mulch, but they will shade out the soil, so they'll protect the soil below. So that's a really good feature as well. So stacking and zones, if you could just walk away with 2 of those ideas and look into them, I think they'll really help based on some of the problems people have shared today. But I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions, and we only really have 6 minutes left in this. I will be staying on for another 10 minutes, but I don't want to leave. I want to make sure that everybody else can leave at that mark. So I will open it up. Oh, Catherine, do you want to share something before we move
Yeah,
on?
just one of the biggest takeaways for me from when I studied permaculture was the power of observation. If
Yeah.
there's something that I can encourage you all to do on a day-to-day level is, and I was thinking about grabbing, a calendar and really observing, where is the sun, where is the wind, where is what plants are growing well in what parts of, my surrounding gardens, if not my garden, my neighbors' gardens. And I know that was a really huge part of Bill Mollison, who created permaculture. When he first came up with it, he took 2 years off in his life to sit on his land and just
Mm,
watch it. And he watched his land and
mm,
he learnt from what was around him. And so for me, the observation, not just of the natural elements and the plants and the wind and the rain, but also of maybe more experienced gardeners who live next door, the elders who have been there, the people who have lived on that land. That's an invaluable source of their observation. So to start seeing that we don't have to all get it on our own, we don't have to try and master something and take control of it, that if we can start to observe and to listen and to see and to ask questions and to go to the source of great knowledge that may already be around us, then that's invaluable, whether it be, from a book. But yeah, especially for everyone on your own zone. We can't possibly give you all the advice that we have from my subtropical garden when you're living, in a cold, high elevation. So yeah, that was just something for me that was really, really stood out for me, is learning how to observe in permaculture.
yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's one of my permaculture teachers said. If don't do anything for the first 12 months, just observe through the whole season. And I've I've tried to do that. It's been really hard,
No,
but
make mistakes. Get in
it's
there and make
yeah,
mistakes.
and then there's
You
that part
observe
of me
failure
that
mistakes
does
as
it.
well.
But when
Don't
it
be
comes to fruit
afraid.
trees, because I know they're in for the long haul, I'm just like, I'm not going to plant too many. But no, thanks. That's a really good point. Observe and interact is the first principle. And if you guys have been looking at the course material, that is the 12 principles by David Holmgren. As I said, is really dense. You could spend 12 months, a month on every principle and get something from it. But I'd really look at just getting a brief understanding of those principles, because you can not only apply them to your garden but to life. They're actually really powerful ways to look at everything. So I find them quite inspirational in many different levels. So that's the 12 principles of permaculture by David Holmgren, if anybody's interested. And there's a link in the course.
And of
Uh,
course, zone 0, zone 1 is my favorite zones. You know,
yeah,
that's the out the back door, in
yeah,
my house and out the back door. I don't try and go any bigger. Small space gardening is that easy.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
So
the idea of a kitchen garden, really, isn't it? You have a kitchen garden. That's what I want, a kitchen garden. I can walk
yeah,
out, grab the herbs, go back to my cooking pot, that sort of thing, yeah. Yeah.
I want to make sure I've got questions. Bev, you wanted to ask a question about your harvesting the worms. Do you want to just run me through that?
Well, as I said, I started my sub pod exactly 1 year ago,
Awesome.
and I've done one harvest so far. They've
Okay.
been very, very productive, but that was back in November and December. And
Okay.
for us here in North Carolina, December, January, February is cold. It's sub-zero centigrade nights sometimes, and then 40 to 50, I don't know what that is, centigrade
Very cold.
daytime. So I haven't been doing much gardening, and
Right.
what I harvested is stored in my garage.
Okay.
So my question is, how long can I keep it? I mean, does it lose any value? Should I have spread it immediately and let it, let the rain and everything wash it into my garden, or what's the best process there?
It's a good question. There's no like general rule of thumb, because the elements of your house, like the heating, the moisture, will affect the compost. But generally you can leave it. It will further decompose. It's not going to do any harm to have it there, as long as you feel like you've taken it from the compost and there was no decomposing, there's an apple core or anything there,
No.
it was fully composted. You can leave that there.
I
I've had people
screened
leave
it.
it. I've
Yeah.
had people leave compost for years. It's
Oh.
fine. And there's built up microbes. You might need to wake the microbes up when you apply it again. So maybe put some sugars, some molasses, or some fish hydrolysate, just kind of get them going. But other than that, you can use it whenever it works for you.
Oh, good.
It's
I
Good.
mean, it'd be probably good to keep it a little bit moist and
Yes.
to let it still get a bit of air, because it's about having
Yes.
a living
Yes,
thing.
I did that. I punched holes in the top. It's a big plastic tub, but I punched holes
Awesome.
through the top and around the upper area so that it circulates some.
How are you thinking of applying that? Because you've
I
got
was
black
going
gold
to
there.
I was going to use that for some flower pots
Yeah.
and things. Because it's not time yet. We've still had frost, so it's not time to put out the tender plants yet. But that was one chamber, and when I harvested the second chamber, I took that and spread it actually into my vegetable garden immediately.
Right.
That was in December. So I've actually sowed my lettuces, and I have spinach and lettuces and arugula and things coming up now.
Awesome.
And then, I'm hoping once I put other vegetable plants in there, that it will still be, helpful.
What I find, to get the most bang for your buck, because what we're making here is amazing compost, like homemade compost. You'll see in the course I talk about the difference between buying bag compost, even
I
if it's
saw that.
organic, versus
Yeah, I saw
homemade.
that.
And so I actually like to use it when I'm planting. So dig the hole, put a little bit of a handful there,
Okay.
and that compost will start to interact with the roots, will start to build up a relationship with it, and it can grow from there. So you can spread it all into your garden and everything, but to get the most bang for your buck, put it directly where the roots are going to be when you're planting, and you can.
Good idea.
That's what I personally do, just to get the most. Or I'll make a compost extract, and that's another way.
Yes. The tea. Yes.
Yes. So those two things, but that's awesome. All right, does anybody else have anything else they want to ask or share? Are you muted, Abhijit?
Yeah. One question, a technicality is, how do I most easily find your course materials? So that I know I'm looking at all of your course materials.
I'll send you a
Somewhere
link.
in the last week, I found Holgreen's 12 principles, and I actually copied them out, and I'll be darned if I can find them on the website now, but could I copy them out? And then,
Send you
yeah.
Yeah, I'll send you a link. It's in our Grow Hub. So we have a community there where any sub pod owner, or even if you want, can go there and we have everything hosted there. So it's essentially kind of like a social media, like a Facebook, but without us stealing information and sending you ads. And so I'll send you a link on how to log on to it. Okay, I'll do that now.
And
Yeah,
then,
our Grow Hub is where we're trying to rebuild it. The Mighty Networks did a bit of a reshuffle on us at the end of the year, and so we're slowly adding more and more resources. And so I love your feedback if you'd like what you'd like to see on there. You know, you can search using the hashtags, but the Grow Hub's where we're hoping to build more and more resources. So just wanted to add.
well, I found that the easiest to access over the Mighty Mouse, whatever that other one was.
Do you see the link now? Can you click on that link now in your message?
I don't see anything but my Zoom page.
Nothing in chat here. Have you?
Oh no, I've just sent it to Abhijit. Oh, I can send it to the group, I guess.
Yeah, send it to the chat. Be interesting to see.
Oh, sure. I'll send that to the group. So that's the course there. And if you're a member of Grow Hub, then you should be able to go right in there. Otherwise, it takes 2 seconds just to join.
Right, because I won't keep up with the chat on Zoom. I find it kind of distracting.
Oh, sure. Well, can you click on that link, or do you want me to send you an email?
I think that'll do it, but we'll see.
Okay.
Here we go.
Great. Well, let me know if you can't find it. Just send me an email. Did you have anything else to share, Abhijit? Do you have any other questions?
Well, that the bit about how to work. Now I've lost you guys, but
I got you.
The part about using the compost, that initial suggestion there of using it at the root level of transplanting is really helpful. I didn't have a sub pod this winter, but last year, it's been almost a year that I've been using a machine called Lomi that you've probably heard of. And during the growing season last year was applying that in my beds when I needed to go through and feed all the whatever. But then I've been saving it all winter in order to, and then the question was how best to use it. So maybe I should maybe consider, use half of it make it into a tea and use half of it.
Well, Lomi's a bit different.
Lomi, they say to dilute it down 10-to-1 with some other medium, whatever your best medium is.
Yeah, Lomi's a bit different, just in the way that it's not biologically active. It uses a power source, heats up the food waste, and really turns it into carbonous fluff. There's as far as I understand, there's no microbes that break it down, really, as far as my understanding. So
they have a pellet that you add that is claiming to be the probiotic, which I make sure I add that, but I can't see these microbes. So
yeah, that's right. When we're working with a system like SubPod, the compost is far more diverse in microbes. We're using composting worms rather than maybe a selective microbes that they add in at the end. So my suggestion would be to actually add the SubPod to it afterwards and use the SubPod compost to your Lomi compost, and that will help bring in the diversity of microbes. And that's what I would do, because I've seen the end product of it, and it kind of, it looks a little bit lifeless. And I go through in that course of how to be able to assess soil or compost to see if it has good soil structure, which is one of the main signs of there's healthy microbes. You just need to drop it in water, really. So it'd be interesting to do that test and to see it and observe it to see if it can handle water without breaking. But
Yeah, I did try that with the loamy because I saw
sure,
that.
okay, yeah,
And it was a very watery kind of a
yeah,
situation, and I won't continue with the loamy once the worms are you know, able to go outside and receive my offerings. The loamy will be retired or a winter item or whatever.
yeah. Oh, that sounds great. I mean, you could use both, like you're saying. You could loamy at first and then throw it in the sub pot afterwards. I know some people do that if it's easier for you. I think what I always go back to whatever works out easiest for you. Since you have two systems going there, why not combine the two?
So are you suggesting that I maybe take the loamy that I've stored over the winter
Pop it in the sub
and
pod.
put it
It-
into the sub
Absolutely.
pod when they go out initially?
Yes, it would probably be a really good bedding material, I think. It would be.
Awesome.
Yeah, try that out. Let me know how you go. You're the first person I know that's really done that, but from my understanding, it should be good. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
On a very basic level, okay, because I'm, as I said, I'm starting here from scratch and whatever. What would be like taking the seasons into account where I am now? What would be a realistic sort of general overview of where I start? So it sounds to me like the first thing I've got to do is create compost. Is that right? Which is actually an issue at the moment because I'm not even composting, which is the first time in my life I'm not actually composting my own material. So, I mean, so season-wise, looking on what we're doing, and we go into autumn and then winter, it like you would think that everything would be in preparation of the soil till the spring season comes and then basically start. Is that right? Or laying out spaces and basically, is that what I realistically should be focusing on at
That's
the
what
moment?
I would do. That's what I would do. I mean, there's a limited amount of things you can grow. And there are things that you can grow. Maybe you want to get a greenhouse or something, but I would prepare my soil. Like I didn't grow anything the first 3 months here. I just prepared my soil, and then I had really good food. So if I just threw in the seedlings in straight away, probably wouldn't have got that much good of a yield. And I think I kind of treat compost as usually plants take 3 months, right, from maturity. I treat compost as like the pre-planting stage. But maybe Catherine, do you have anything to share on that? So Amy,
we
you're down in Melbourne.
Similar climates as well. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
similar climate to me. That's true. You've just moved in, and I heard you had a bit of challenge with sun there. There's not much sun. Do you have a
only in a certain area, which I assume will be the garden bit, the vegetable garden bits will be in that.
Okay. So how much do you know how many hours do you get?
No, I need to still, honestly, I've been here so close. But basically what it is, because it's the backyard is south facing. I've got a freestanding 1 meter on both sides, or 1.5 meters.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the sun is sort of coming across.
On
one side, and then I've got a bit of western sun, I've got a bit of northern sun, but it's coming across.
Okay.
Which area I would use, but the northern facing is actually on the street side, and I mean, I may have to go there if I need to, but
my parents in Melbourne, they've done that. They've just, so I know it's a deal with council and everything, but putting it on the front verge.
So that might be an extension, but I'm trying to do something. Again, also my kitchen, my back door is right there. So it's sort of what can I create in the back, basically. So, I mean, maybe in the short term, because I do like my herbs, I might put some herbs in pots or something. So I got something to start with. And yes, and I would also like to, I don't know if that falls in your area, but I'd like to know a little bit about being realistically about setting up a vertical garden as well, especially for herbs and things. But I don't know if that's a realistic option, because we're at the moment now looking, well, shall we put something up? And so we could do the structures. We could work on the structures over the next few months. So that's where I'm at, basically. But yes, I'm sort of getting from what you're saying is soil preparation, location, and more observation. That's where I would start. And then but this webinar gives me sort of motivation to have a bit of mentoring, I suppose, in the steps I'm taking, but also to actually do it. So, and I will do it because I think it's essential to grow our own food, and essential to help the community with that and things. It's something I would encourage some other people with. And I'll put them onto what you're doing. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely starting, like, my suggestion would be to have pots or containers or beds that you can move as you need to, particularly because I'm noticing even in my little backyard here that
Yeah.
the sun is really shifting now that we're heading into autumn and winter, and
Yeah.
I've really noticed the difference, the shift in the sun. So it's particularly when you're starting out in a new space that you've moved into, have something that you can help it get the sun. And then it's just really important to get in any container growing the soil that you want to start off with. The better the soil that you start off with, of course, the higher the yield's going to be straight away until you can start building it. And I've really found success lately in having what's this coconut coir peat that you've probably seen and a lot of us talking about. What's so great about it is that it adds so much air and structure to the soil. It stops a lot of that compaction that you find sometimes in container growing. It helps to allow the roots to get out into the soil and for the bacteria and the microbes to breathe. So that would be one of my things. If you are going to start building some soil, make sure you can buy products that have already got it in it. But you want something that's not going to compact and that's going to allow the roots and the microbes and everything to move around in. And to start off with some, and you may have to, unless you've got your own worm castings and compost already, is buy one of those liquid feeds that can help build up the ecology in the soil and feed the plants until you've got it to a state where it looks after itself, and you've got some castings, say with a sub pod or from wherever you might get them. But worm castings are one of the best types of natural fertilizers, because not only does it have the nutrients, but it has that life in it. It has that microbe, and it's all about the relationship between the microbes and the bacterias that then feed the plants from what's in the soil.
So I can start that as well. I can start.
And if you're in a south facing, just you go to your nursery is also a really great source of information. You say, look, this is where I've got to grow things. What can I grow? And like you go for shade loving plants. So you'll be like the mints and things that that can tolerate a bit of shade. Some of the lettuces, things like kale and coriander, and just start doing a little, just Google shade tolerant herbs in you're in a Mediterranean climate, so and as I said, go to the nursery and see what's in season. That's my other thing, is I always go to what my local nursery's got looking the best, and then I go, okay, that's what's time to grow now. Don't try and grow tomatoes in a shady, going into winter garden. So that would be my other tip.
So the coconut product was what?
It's called coconut coir peat. Now, if you go to like Bunnings in Australia and you go into it's usually near the sort of the food plant area and the seeds. It's like a compressed brick. And it's you put it in a bucket and you add water and it expands, and it's like very fine sawdust. So you just got to make sure that you get the fine one, because they have different grades. They have some of them that's really chunky, which is great for mulch, and then they have some that are really fine, and that's the one. The other one, that if you've got a nursery that does Rocky Point products, there's something called Cocoa Pro, and that's a really good potting mix that's already got 40% coir peat in it in Australia, and that's what I started off all our raised garden beds at Subpod, and I was just amazed at how great the plants were doing immediately, and how the soil doesn't compact like it with other soils I've used. So if you can find that one, it's in the dark blue bag. It's called Cocoa Pro.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, guys. I just wanted to give you all the opportunity. If you needed to get off now, that's more than completely fine. I wanted to give Tammy, if you wanted to share, but let's just open up to the rest of the people. If anyone needs to leave, feel free to. Otherwise, we'll leave a couple of minutes for Tammy just to share. If you have any questions, Tammy, just wanted to give you the opportunity. No. Okay, great. All right. Well, that's a wrap then. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. I hope you've got something from this. And every week we will go through the course. Next week we will be looking at our different aspects. So the planning. So just as Catherine was saying, the observation, we'll be looking at wind, water, and sun, how that impacts your garden. So if you're following along and you're actually setting up a garden, it might actually be a good time to do that in the next week. So start to find out how much sun you have in your property. Look at the limitations or like where your water source is, and then look at where your wind's coming from, and do the best you can. And then when you come next week, or if you need to, just chuck me a message on GrowHub and ask me any questions. So we'll be following along the course weekly. But if you do have questions throughout it, you can always just put it in the chat section. I'll be on there most days and I can answer it there. But yeah, thanks so much, everybody, for coming along. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And for those of you who are watching the recording and can't attend these live sessions, feel free to throw your questions in the chat too, so we can address them in the recording and you can watch them later. So yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Excellent.
Have a great day.